1, 2, 3. Oh, there it is. How's that? Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Glad to be with y'all. Well, this has been fun. This so far for me. I hope it'll be somewhat fun for you. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to start this little talk with a book that I go to often for prayers. Stanley Hauerwas's Prayers Plainly Spoken. He's a theology prof and ethicist at Duke who is famous for dropping F-bombs in his lectures and whatnot, just not your average guy. And so he has prayers that he's written. He wrote prayers for his class. There are no F-bombs in this prayer. He wrote prayers for the beginning of his classes and eventually collected them in a book. So Prayers Plainly Spoken. This is one called The Lustiness of Your Kingdom. Let's pray. Lovely and compelling God, draw us to your beauty so that our lives will glow with reverence for you. We confess that too often, if we glow at all, we are hot with hate and lust. We cannot will our lives free of these powers, so we ask that you send us faithful friends to transform our hate and lust to love. We rejoice in our bodies, for you would not have us be ethereal. Make us bold, bodily lovers so that others might be drawn to the lustiness of your kingdom. Amen. I don't think lustiness appears anywhere in the prayer book, but it's in this one. So what I want to do today is not do a pre-travel log. When Catherine asked me if I'd say something about the sabbatical, I thought, well, you could come up and you say where you're going to go, and then I'd come back in the fall and tell you where I went. Which is boring already. But I do want to talk about the sabbatical process, things I'm going to be delving into, why it might make sense for a priest to get away for a minute and think in different ways. I mean, one thing I want to put down is if you think about it, I appreciate people saying, oh, I'm glad you get rest and want that, and we will rest and restore. But if you count on a sabbatical to combat exhaustion, I mean, good luck with that. It's like your doctor saying, you should probably get 50 to 55 hours of sleep a week, and then saying, well, is it okay if I just go to bed at midnight on Friday and early Monday morning, just get it all taken care of, rest and refreshment needs to happen as a regular basis. So a sabbatical, it doesn't mean there isn't a certain kind of refreshment, but I don't think the main purpose is to run into sabbatical time on fumes and completely recharged. So I'm happy to say that I'm not there. I'm energized by what's going on around here, and so I feel like it's a ripe time to go explore some ideas. So I've titled it Carnal Virtues, Church as a Community of Craft. This is, I couldn't help playing with the word carnal. It usually makes us think of nasty things, but it just means embodied, right? Just means embodied. So rather than the cardinal virtues or the carnal sins, let's think in terms of virtue. And virtue has a long history in the Christian tradition as a way of doing ethics. Rather than having God drop a law in that we can either obey or not obey, which is one mode of doing ethics, the virtue ethics tradition said that we have these muscles that need exercising, like embodied relationship. And virtues isn't like you possess a virtue once and for all. It really has to do with the life of faith, and just life is about how do we exercise the parts of the self that need to be exercised so that we can flourish in community, really. So those are some of the things. I want to take you through some of the things I want to explore during this. I've got this picture. This is my daughter Kate in my shop, and I thought about, well, if I'm going to talk about community, maybe I should put a picture of more people than just Kate in there. But actually, she's building a stool that I helped her learn how to build, made out of scraps from Calvary's project, some of the oak that came out of the floor. So there's a lot of story there as far as there's family, there's place, there's material. There are a lot of layers to how knowledge gets passed on. And one of the main things that I do want to explore is, how does knowledge get passed on in community? We're people of liturgy, so we believe in embodied experiences together. It's not just instructing you in what a Christian's supposed to believe. You'll have a beautiful sermon today about singing and holding poems inside us, and liturgy, how it can get inside us. So there's a lot more going on than just Kate working on the leg of that stool, and I thought it might be a good place to start. So I want to go back, actually, 2009. And I'm going to read you something that I wrote 2009. I don't know if you realize this, that's 16 years ago. Just saying. 16 years ago. And I want to read this. I think I posted it once on our blog years ago. It's an article I wrote. It's the only article I ever submitted to get published. I got lucky and I got it published. I haven't done anything since because I want to stick it 100%. I'm not going to risk it. But it's a story about how I came into the Episcopal Church in some ways and how it connects with my prior life as a carpenter. So it's not too long. I'm going to read it. I learned to install a door one day in small-town Arkansas in a nondescript tract home with pinkish mottled brick that was dated even before the mason finished his work. The door was delivered from the lumber yard as a unit, already hinged and hung in its jamb, and my boss, Dave, gave me all the information I needed to install it. He told me how to make sure the studs on the hinge side of the opening were plumb in two directions and how to tack up shims to correct for the framer's hurry. He explained that a push on a corner in one direction would affect a logical movement in another. All I had to do was fill the framed opening with the door, making all things plumb and flush. But when he returned an hour and a half later, Dave found me struggling at my task. I had all the information I needed, but in my inexperienced hands, the seemingly rigid door behaved like a balloon. A push in one spot created a bulge somewhere else. A gentle shim tap created a whirlwind of chaos somewhere else. Dave stepped in, gave a few knowing bumps and shoves, and in a matter of moments, all was right with the door. The goal of any apprenticeship is the transfer of knowledge to the hands. The result is the properly fit thing, a flush door, a mitered corner. I grew up in a Christian tradition that places a great deal of value on religious information, but although I couldn't have said it as a child, I had a hunch that my knowledge of the faith wasn't making its way into some important parts of myself. I felt like a clumsy apprentice. I had sufficient information in my head, but my hands remained ignorant and inadequate. Liturgical worship assumes that bodies learn too. It's not enough to fill one's mind with a collection of facts established by a pope or a prophet or a sacred text. Something happens, something's communicated into ourselves when we bow, stand, kneel, sing, and process together. At the end, I'll skip to the end. Perhaps the liturgy is like that door I struggled with as a carpenter's apprentice. The transformation it works on us is a bodily transformation, affecting all of ourselves, mind and body. Maybe I'm meant to struggle with the liturgy until its wisdom makes its way into my hands, into my belly, into my bones. So I read that. 16 years ago, I was starting to try to understand the way that theology and that Christianity, especially post-Enlightenment, has been a very heady thing. We have doctrines that we hold in our heads. And in the tradition I grew up in, believing the right thing in my head about God led to salvation. Like God cared about what I just thought. I don't believe the opposite of that, the logical opposite, which is I have to go perform for God, that I have to get my life just right so that God will affect me. But I do believe in incarnation, that the wisdom of the Christian tradition happens in embodied relationship, and there's something particular and peculiar about that. So that's a little background on me starting to think in these directions. In 2013, I had a credo. Credo is something that Bill Craddock helped start in the Episcopal Church, and every so often there are these retreats for clergy to try to keep us from getting burned out and unhealthy and making your lives miserable. And it's a really wonderful program. And there were a few lines from Seamus Heaney that arose that I returned to often. They are these: keep your eye clear as the bleb of the icicle. Trust the feel of what nubbed treasure your hands have known. Keep your eye clear as the bleb of the icicle. Trust the feel of what nubbed treasure your hands have known. I love Seamus Heaney. The bleb of the icicle is just the frozen drop, you know, the clear frozen drop that you can see through. These two things, keeping my eyes clear, seeing what's in front of us, what life is actually presenting to us, and trusting the treasure our actual hands have known. How do I trust and not talk myself out of the actual treasures that I've encountered in other people? It's kind of been a little guiding, a few guiding lines. In 2015, I took a sabbatical. That's my younger brother. No, that's me, in 2015. Some people showed me a picture of myself the other day and were laughing that I may have aged. In that sabbatical, I was studying a theology of the built environment. So coming out of that life as a carpenter, I was in a downtown church in Little Rock at the time. In seminary, I'd spent time at Church of the Epiphany, which is in downtown Washington, D.C., 13th and G. It's similar to these parishes, Calvary and Christ Church as well. Vigorous outreach ministry to vulnerable people. But I grew up in a town of 8,400 in northwest Arkansas, Siloam Springs, you know. So I was this country kid, small town kid from Arkansas that became enamored of cities and found myself really drawn to these downtown churches and the way that a city can actually do powerful things for Christians if we really believe that the stranger is a sacred one. You meet more strangers in a city if you've got public transportation and sidewalks and all of the things and many other things. We're in a bell tower in England. The guy on the right is Timothy Garringe, who's a professor at Exeter, and he wrote a book called A Theology of the Built Environment. You probably don't want to read it, but he's a fascinating guy who really started to say, if Christians are going to think ethically and in Christian ways about the world as a place of justice, ecologically, all of these things, we can't disentangle these questions from the way our cities are built. Like, we know that redlining was made illegal in the Civil Rights Act and persisted. Cities still were segregated by race, by socioeconomic. So clearly, we can't just pass a law and wash our hands of these questions. And so if a Christian's interested in how we relate to each other, this is a valid line of inquiry. It's really important. So that was my theme last time. Interestingly enough, that's Tim Gorringe. We went out he lives in the middle of nowhere in England. He had moved to an old cob house that's been there for 500 years, and he raises sheep. But I put that up there because you wouldn't think that scene really helped prepare me for this one. But it did, because I've told the story more than once that being drawn toward Calvary had everything to do to hear about how Calvary was attending and getting curious about its physical environment. Who owns 100 North Main? This question was being asked. Other places of blight. Do they care about Memphis? Do they live here? This is where the questions around the 87 Adams slave market came up, that Tim Hubner and others, Margaret Craddock and others, started investigating. So there was this deep interest in actually the physical environment. I wasn't looking for, we just had a lovely dinner with our search committee. As they know, I wasn't looking for someplace else at the time. So it was really an opening up of, well, maybe this would align because these folks are really getting curious, not just about, can we do a good thing in this place? But like, what's the structure of the place? What's the fabric of our neighborhood? What's its story? And how does that contribute to who we are and what God might be calling us to? All right, so that's some background. Now I'm going to take you into some books and ideas that are kind of forming what I'm going to do. So I'm not going to read that many books, but those are some books that are on my shelf that start to get at some of the ways I want to think and pray and experience my way into these questions. I'm going to start with the most kind of theological one. Isn't that clever? Robin, I did that. I figured out how to do. Isn't that nice? Yeah, thanks. So René Girard was a French-American literary thinker. He taught for years at Stanford. He's really one of a transformational kind of person, and he start his inquiry around the scapegoats. And realizing that in culture after culture, something happens in human communities. Two questions he wants to talk about. One is what he calls mimetic desire. We learn what we want from other people. And one of the simplest ways that he talked about this that's pretty compelling, if you've ever watched, say, a couple of 3-year-olds with a bunch of toys in front of them, as soon as one wants one, the other one wants that thing. Right? Anybody ever experienced it? Well, Rene Girard says, we don't grow out of that. The advertisers know we don't grow out of that. They know how to put somebody cool and hip and beautiful and wanting this thing, and all of us, well, maybe I would want one of those things too, you know. So he says this goes deep in the way that humans are put together. The problem with it is that this learning our desires is it puts us in a rivalry. All of a sudden, I'm in a rivalry with, again, the 3-year-old or the 30-year-old or the 90-year-old. We're in a rivalry to have the coolest thing. If you've got one, I need it too. And he says that actually leads to violence. This is how communities start to process. We think we're independent, free beings, but our desires are being formed, and we're moving toward violence. Now, what's interesting about this to me too is that Rene Girard became a Christian in the process of studying this, and he said the Christian story of the cross can be told in a way that sounds like a scapegoat, right? Somebody needs to satisfy the God with a sacrifice. Girard says it's the opposite. And it goes back even further. It's not just in the Judeo-Christian story. Remember the first brotherly rivalry in the Bible? Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel's an interesting story. You remember one brother offers the sacrifice for reasons we don't know. It's not acceptable. And God says, I really want this sacrifice. I want you to bring animals. That brother gets jealous, kills the other, right? So Cain kills Abel because he's mad because God won't accept likes his brother better. Thank God we've evolved beyond this kind of behavior. But here's the different thing. In most of those myths, Romulus and Remus were brothers in a myth. Romulus kills Remus. Romulus gets to found Rome. The living brother is the one who won. It's the victor. What happened when did God come and say to Cain? Anybody remember? I hear the blood of your brother crying out to me. God aligns with the victim. Rather than saying, here's the strong one, let's go build a city, you lead my army. All the way back there, it turns it upside down, and this rivalry is broken. And God says, no, I'm actually attending to the victim. So when Jesus comes and it becomes this victim, we talk about in terms of perfect victim because Jesus doesn't get any vengeance at all, right? He doesn't return any of that violence. Girard says this is the opposite of the scapegoat story. This is what it looks like to get free of that rivalry that sends us into violence as humans. So James Allison is another person who interprets him. He was the last preacher before the pandemic shut down Lenten preaching here at Calvary. So I'm interested in this question, and what's interesting about it too is it really returns us into embodied relationships. I heard James Allison say in describing this mimetic, this imitating other folks to see what we want, someone asked him, well, if my desires aren't really me, like sometimes we talk that way, like your deepest desire is who you truly are. Well, if those can shift and change, who am I? And Allison said, well, your body. You're a body. This is who you are. You're an embodied creature. You don't have to get passed through your body down into some mysterious desire you have. Okay, anyway. So I want to use him as one of my. Oh, there's a picture of him. Isn't that cool? A second one that I've been curious about for a while is a guy who's not a religious person, although he's became a friend along the way of Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury. Richard Sennett is a thinker about all kinds of things, but he wrote a book called The Craftsman, in which he got curious about how communities of craft become communities, how they pass on knowledge, how you become a member. And part of what's interesting about this to me is I think we live in a world right now that lives in which a lot of communities are creedal. And that is, if you assent to these ideas, whether it's a political party or a religion, then we'll let you in. And Sennett said, in a lot of the craft guilds, it was a different way of passing on knowledge and forming community. We are going to come together and learn this skill and do something out in the physical world. I'm going to read you just a couple paragraphs. One of the stories he tells that's fascinating is the Stradivarius workshop. There's a great mystery still, you might know if you're a musician, that all the king's horses and all the king's men have never put a Stradivarius back together again. You know, they can't crack the nut of what made that instrument. And yet, it wasn't just one guy, right? Antonio Stradivarius had dozens of people working in his workshop, and somehow this was coming together. Here's a glimpse inside the Stradivarius workshop. Inside the workshop of Stradivari also looked back in that, like that of other luthiers, the physical house was both a place of work and a home, filled with Stradivari's family and many young male apprentices and journeyman lodgers. Labor dominated all waking hours. The workshop operated from dawn to dusk with the work team literally rooted to the benches, since the unmarried apprentices slept underneath them on bags of straw. I'm not recommending that. As in the past, Stradivari's male children learning the business were subjected to the same formal rules as the lodger apprentices. Youngsters at work usually did such preparatory labor as soaking wood in water, rough molding, and rough cutting. Journeymen higher up did finer belly cutting and neck assembly, with the master himself took charge of the ultimate installation of the parts and of varnishing, the protective coating of the wood being the ultimate guarantor of its sound. The master, however, was everywhere present in the production. We know, thanks to the researches of Tony Faber, that Stradivari occupied himself with the smallest details in the production of his violins. Though he rarely traveled in the house, he was in constant motion, not confined to an office, an imperious, even hectoring character who sometimes threw spectacular tantrums, oozing instructions and exhortations. I'm a nerd for workshops, so it was fascinating just to hear how this was put together. You can imagine people learning the craft of building violins. You're not going to learn that in a book. You're going to put your straw mat out, and you're going to sleep under it, and you're going to take in all of this knowledge in your body. That begins to connect for me with what I was talking about in that article about liturgy. Like something that we do as people in church, whether you're in a liturgical tradition or not, has to do with simply the relationships we're making, the trust we're building, the songs we're singing, all of this embodied experience. And there's a long tradition of wisdom that I think could be helpful to us. So Richard Sennett is one of them. He wrote another book called Together that's just on cooperation, the history of cooperation instead of competition. I'm going to do one more here, and then I'll take you into a few. Oh, I keep forgetting I put these cool pictures up there of these people. I'm also curious about George Nakashima. Was a great 20th century furniture builder. He was Japanese, although he he spent a lot of his time in California. I'm going to read you how he got to Pennsylvania, where he some of you will know about this unfortunate chapter in our history, but you might not know a personal story about what happened after Pearl Harbor. Then Pearl Harbor broke, and all of us of Japanese descent were put in concentration camps. My wife and I and our newly born daughter were sent to a camp in Idaho. This, I felt at the time, was a stupid and sensitive act, one by which my country could only hurt itself. It was a policy of unthinking racism. Even Eskimos with only a small percentage of Japanese blood were sent to the western desert to die. Luckily, in Idaho, I met a fine Japanese carpenter trained in Japan along traditional lines, and we joined forces. He had the discipline resulting from long years of experience, and what each step was learned with consummate perfection. I was his designer, but also his apprentice. We worked well together, scrounging in scrap wood piles for bits of lumber. Sometimes we received permission to go out into the desert of central Idaho to find bits of bitterbrush, a brave shrub of great character, which grows only a few feet in 100 years. I learned a great deal from this man through his hundreds of small acts of perfection. He helped me with many of the basic woodworking skills. For instance, the correct sharpening of a chisel. We used a traditional Japanese water stone, which if handled well can produce the finest of edges. If used improperly, the expensive stone can be ruined by gouging it or putting a belly in it. Later, it was announced that if we were willing to move from the West Coast area, we could leave the camp. Fortunately, Anton and Raymond, for whom I'd worked in Tokyo, owned a farm in Pennsylvania. He invited my family to join him there. I was to work on his farm. This was our start in New Hope. Nakashima and his family then founded a school and a furniture business in New Hope, Pennsylvania, that still exists. He's not with us any longer. Something just that I admire about him, that's one of his benches. A lot of the modern furniture really moved away from bringing the wood itself. He has great reverence for trees themselves. He has what they call live edges on a lot of his furniture, or a mended flaw in the middle of it. So instead of the sleek perfection that marks a lot of modern furniture, Nakashima brought some. All right. How are we doing? All right, we're doing okay. I could take a breath and ask if anybody has questions. I'm just racing through these ideas. Raise your hand if you want me to stop and unpack an idea as we go. Introduce you to a few people that I'm curious about in the days to come. This is kind of the background, some of the things I'm reading and thinking about. So one more book. This is a short one. A Short History of Black Craft in 10 Objects is by a furniture maker in Atlanta named Rebel Awake. And Rebel Awake worked as a carpenter for years and then started making furniture in a tiny little shop behind his house. He started making chairs. Also, a little bit like, well, his history is woven into his craft in the way that Nakashima's is in a way. He started getting curious about black craftspeople in the history of the United States. And he realized that in Reconstruction after the Civil War, probably 80 to 90% of the actual craftspeople who would have been making furniture would have been black. They just didn't get their names on the chairs. The shop owned, they couldn't own things. So Rebel Awake started looking into this history, and Richard Pointer, I was trying to think of that. He found that there was a black chair maker named Richard Pointer who it's unclear how free he got. Like, it goes back and forth. He seemed to make a living, might have purchased some of his freedom, but he made fabulous inventions that blended different modes of chair making, and even invented a horse-drawn lathe. So a clever guy, an engineer, and Richard Pointer's chairs actually did get their names on them. So Rebel Awake wrote this book, 10 Black Craft in 10 Objects. So it's geese bend quilts, if you know what those are. There's sweetgrass braiding in South Carolina of the Gullah folks. He just started investigating his history through the things people made and how that knowledge was passed on. There's one of his chairs that I think is kind of wild. He also incorporated some African, in his own chairs, he incorporates some African carving and occasionally just some Cat5 computer cable, apparently. So he's a pretty interesting guy. There's another guy named Scott Braun who lives in Baltimore now, but he was in Richmond when the controversies around removing the Robert E. Lee statue came to town. And he's both a sculptor and a furniture maker, and he's been an educator as well. He taught for a time, I think, at Yale. And he thought, how do we get people were really ticked off at each other. It just touched a nerve as Richmond started grappling with its history. And so he said, how can we possibly get people to talk to each other across these? This here's how he describes the first decency project that he started. The first participants were invited from the Richmond City Republican Committee, local gun rights organizations, and protesters surrounding the monument. The project has since traveled to 15 states across the U.S. with plans to expand internationally. Participants have also expanded to address local conditions, a women's march and counter-protesters in Philadelphia, immigrant populations in New York with interpreters, quantum theorists, physicists, and engineers at the Colorado School of Mines, and C-suite executives to further incorporate issues of economic structure to the conversation. And what he does is that weird-looking bicycle that he's on, if you can see it, is what's called a shave horse. People who use a draw knife have these benches where you can pinch a piece of wood. If you're making a chair or something you need to shave on it, it allows you to move it around. That's a shave horse, and he's carving a spoon. And the thing that he just figured out he could get people talking across all these, radioactive differences is if they were both learning how to carve a spoon, it's amazing what they could talk about. It's interesting to think about human nature, right? If you and I are encountering each other in the realm of ideas, and I think you hold the wrong ones in your head, we can't talk. But I've also always been curious about, how everybody ends up in the kitchen at a party? I really always wondered if that's because there's all these people doing other things. Or even if nobody's actually cooking, there's all the signs that something else happens in this room. There's a blender over there, and there's a sink, and something's relieved. If we're toe-to-toe and have two, we're pulled up on the couch, let's have a conversation, there's a lot at stake there. But a lot of good things can happen along the way. So Scott Braun, he's in Baltimore now. I've been in conversation with him. He's found this third thing. And that one's got my imagination thinking about how it could matter to us at church as well, as we think about how could we actually be a place where people could unexpectedly find themselves in conversation. I've talked for a long time. I'm gonna take a breath and then we'll go. Anybody have questions or thoughts after I've talked for a half an hour straight without 45 minutes? Scott.
I was thinking about driving carpool.
Driving carpool.
So if you're in the front of the car and you're driving, you put you in the front of the car and you're driving.
Yeah.
You're not face to face with You're not face to face with your children. And they maybe have other kids with them, so they're talking, and so you can kind of just interject yourself. It's the same kind of concept, or if you go fishing or do anything.
I love driving. The driving carpool is a great one if you've ever been asked to do that. Kids will say things when you haven't asked them to report on their day. Nothing will shut down a kid more than saying, "So what happened today?" Yeah. Nothing. Yeah, great example. Scott.
Do you know, when you're on the sabbatical, do you have a sense of what, a goal is, or I succeeded in what I meant to do? I mean, this is fascinating what you're talking about. It just is correct. Yeah. So what does it look like to say I did? Deliverable. Do you have something in your, not to us, but to yourself when you say that's exactly what I meant to do?
That's a really good question. It's a good question because I'm living in the tension of that question. I think part of the gift last time that I experienced, I really thought, okay, maybe I'll have a book proposal, maybe I'll have some articles, yada, yada, yada. I had to let go of that on that one. And, the way, one thing I realized is that I'm made to be a parish priest when it comes to writing things. I've submitted one article. I'm not going to be a magazine writer, that's for sure, in 16 years. So the rhythm of church and every other week about having a sermon, that actually is a rhythm that I need that kind of accountability. I do think part of sabbatical is to step back. Whatever the treadmill is that you're on, how can I step off of it and let myself wander in these directions? So what I'm describing may have more, there's probably more madness than method, even though I've tried to make it coherent today. So I'm balancing it. Maybe it'll be some pieces that I've written. Maybe I've got some ideas of where I want to go. But I'm at least not carrying into it the idea that success will mean a book proposal or 3 articles. But success will mean I've had some time to steep in these ideas. I'm going to meet some of these people and actually just see what they do, have coffee with them, maybe make a spoon. I asked him if I could make a spoon. He was going to Korea when we were in conversation.
So it's kind of a paradox of taking a sabbatical and you're telling us all these things you're going to do. And Scott's like, well, what are you going to achieve by taking this rest?
Well, yeah, but the sabbatical structure, it's in a priest's wheelhouse in the same way that it's in a professor's, I think. And when Dave Rupke goes on sabbatical, he has space and time to actually go deeper in a different way into parts of his craft, that he can't do in the same way when he's on the relentless teaching each day. So yes, I think there is a rest component that I will try not to over-program and come back more tired than I was, like we all do from some vacations. But I do think the time for me, and this is me too, I mean, I would rather have a project. Ardell knows this. She thinks I'm ADHD in a very strange way. So it does feed me to kind of have a line of inquiry at least.
And sometimes you assemble like these skills and knowledge here and there, and you don't realize that they all come together. So you may find things on this
Exactly.
we only use for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden they knit together for us, and that's the benefit that we'll.
Dave was saying sometimes you don't realize why you've done something. That's the serendipity, I think, and there's lots of wisdom out here just how you spend your day. They'll tell you you're better off taking a walk instead of working through your lunch hour. You think you're going to get ahead, but you're just not. So you're right. Some of the gift is not being too precise and letting it go where it will.
More an observation of your books, which I was scrambling through Goodreads trying to. How do you curate what you're going to read?
You read a book and then somebody pops up and some of them are woodworkers I admire. Some of them are books I've read over the years that I keep returning to. That some of this has come out. There's another one called Shop Classes Soulcraft that was written years ago if you read that book. Matthew Crawford, who really talks about a return to embody. So it's kind of get to dabble in a lot of areas. And again, I get to, you guys let me do this anyway when I preach. I get to pull this over here and I'm pretty, I'm pretty eclectic. But it's not linear, but it's rich to read a book and then realize, they reference this. I just read one by Peter Korn, who started a furniture school in Maine, I think close to where Mimsy sometimes used to go. And he had all these, the one I'm reading now is The Fiction of a Thinkable World. Just a great title, The Fiction of a Thinkable World. And he talks about the illusion that the world just responds to how we think about it instead of our embodied experience. Anyway, that's not an answer, but maybe a non-answer is an answer.
I may be the only one in here that doesn't really understand what your sabbatical is going to consist of. Are you going to be by yourself, or are you with a bunch of people? Do you have a schedule, or do you just kind of wing it?
I have a schedule when I have to be back at Calvary. We're really blessed that Ardell is a psychotherapist, and she has, since we've been in Memphis, that part of what she does has been all online. And recently there have been some changes in reciprocity so that there are some weird laws about, even though you're a therapist with one other person, you have to be sitting in the state where you're licensed, unless it's wacky stuff. But a few have loosened, so Virginia now has reciprocity, and she's going to be able to most of the time continue her practice, so she gets to come with me. So we'll be together. It's not a group thing. It's an individual. I'm making it up. These are some places that we're gonna head up. There's another guy outside of Richmond. And we're taking this route to go up close to our kids. That's not just a coincidence, get a little bit of. We have a family wedding in D.C. in July. The Decency Project guy is in Baltimore, so I'll go try to carve a spoon with him. the next one, this will help me talk about that too. Our daughter lives in Kingston, New York, which is a couple hours up the Hudson from the city, and the guy in the greenish shirt there is named Andrew Hunter, and he's a woodworker in that area who I think's really cool. He's minimal tools, Japanese sensibilities with his tools and whatnot. And there's a place in Kingston called Rowan Woodwork. It's a serious high-end cabinet shop run by a queer British woman, someone who doesn't find themselves in these kind of spaces very often. But not only that, she has started this thing, this Kezerukai, the Kingston Kez, which is once a month. They open their doors, and whoever wants to come in and have seltzer or beer can learn how to set up a Japanese hand plane. And if this is a sliver of wood coming off of this board in one piece, and Andrew is measuring the thickness of it. So the idea being, think about how finely tuned how sharp that chisel is. If that doesn't make your heart sing, I guess we just don't have that in common. I've been known to send notes to my children in the mail written on a planer shaving when I get a really nice thin one, but I've never gotten one like that. But the idea being, again, like people gathering from the community across differences, doing this quirky thing together and looking at it, all looking in and like, look what you did. And to go back to the wacky stuff with Gerard that I started with, the esoteric stuff, I'm thinking about how do we make communities that are not rivalrous, that are not rivalries. And there's a real opportunity if we think we're making something together and we're excited about what looks like quality, even if quality is just, my gosh, look how long that shaving is, look how tight. Everybody's looking in on it and celebrating it together rather than having some smackdown. And I think we need that badly right now. So I didn't answer your question either, Kate, but it's not, other than to say it's not, I'm going to show you a couple or more places we're going to go, and then I'll.
Just quickly, I was going to say, in the craft community, in the business community, you have these trade secrets, and you don't want anybody to know how you are successful. And I guarantee you, if you go down to the Metal Museum right now and say, teach me to make a ginkgo leaf out of metal, they'll be so happy to pass that knowledge on because they often are afraid it's going to die out.
That's a great example. Y'all know that Benjamin Franklin never took a patent and had invented 100 things because he didn't believe he owned all the knowledge that came before him. Although he is controversial because he took his knowledge and went and started a printing press in Philadelphia, and his brother was really ticked off at it. But he's like, you don't own that. You learn most of that from other people. Anyway, how we own and hang on to knowledge and make it a rivalry versus offer it to the world is a big deal. I'll show you a couple more things. Most of this will be in the States when we'll be traveling. I've got some time to watch. We're going to go over to England after our family wedding in July, and Ardell and I are going to walk about a week in the Cotswolds. We're pretty excited about that. We like to walk. That's in England, actually. Yeah. Looks like West Point. We'll be closer to West Point when we're in Kingston, and then we're going to go hear our choir sing Evensong that weekend. We're really excited. We haven't got to do that any of the prior times they've been in England. And then I'm going to jump over and spend a week with this guy, Alfred Rambaud, in Sarant, France, which is in Brittany, just because I think he's a really cool furniture maker on Instagram. And when I found out that you didn't have to speak French to take his classes, I thought, well, so I'm going to go probably build one of these things. I don't know. It may cost me $2,000 to ship it back to America, but it's just a little knick-knack. It's basically projects so that you can work on all of the different mortise and tenon joints, and he builds things without glue. So each of the different joints are either interlocking and stay that way, or they're wedged. So it's really, he sets up the project. He has a few different classes to teach that. He makes tools too. He's just a cool. He seems like a cool guy. I haven't met him, but that's what we're doing over there. I'll leave you with one more quote. and then we can take more questions if you want. Thomas Merton, who wouldn't strike you as, he's a monk, right? You think of monks as pretty out of the real world kind of folks who've left it. Thomas Merton said, very often, the inertia and repugnance which characterize the so-called spiritual life of many Christians could perhaps be cured by simple respect for the concrete realities of everyday life, for nature, for the body, for one's work, one's friends, one's surroundings. Meditation has no point and no reality unless it's firmly rooted in life. Something in Merton's, as a mystic, as a writer, as an artist, he said, I don't think prayer matters unless it's rooted in actual embodied life with other human beings, the work we do. So I want to learn about that too. That's what I'm doing, sort of. I'm going to go explore some carnal virtues. Other thoughts, questions, or curiosities that it brings up in you? Yeah. Visiting other churches? Oh, that's a good question. Maybe. I don't have...
what could compare to us? I mean,
I know. I suspect we'll go to church a time or two, but I don't have specific churches that I want to go investigate. Last time I did a couple, like when I was thinking about the built environment, we went to Vancouver for a few days. That's usually on the short list of most livable cities in the world. And I went and talked to a priest there about what does ministry look like in your context. But I've really, at least what I'm thinking about is really mostly outside the Christian realm. I kind of want to step outside and absorb some wisdom from these other kinds of communities and then see what it does when I come re-enter. It's a good question. Yeah, Kate.
Whatever we end up with in this slave project that we've got going on, I think it'd be wonderful if we had activities like you're suggesting here where people get together and make things, come up with ideas together.
Actually, yeah, and programming, Christina's in that group. Programming has been one of the questions. So the 87 Adams memorial space, actually, one of the things that the Monument Lab folks recommended, we just got a toe in with the Mellon Foundation, which we're excited about to see. But she said, don't forget about programming. As you're thinking about asking for funding toward the space, talk about what's going to happen there. So whether we know what it'll be right now, yeah, having people doing things is a great idea. Any other thoughts about why this matters to church? I mean, again, to the question about whether I'm going to churches, I'm not going to churches, is it this way of looking at the spiritual life that has shared tasks?
I think for me, one of the things that I'm really listening to you for the last couple of years, but also just kind of at this particular moment of like, we'll all go to church in a few minutes, or and to think about all the things that were brought and made and created. I mean, like flowers on the altar, a meal at the table. I mean, like there's so much crafting work that by groups of people. I mean, you and I stand up there, but we can't do it by ourselves. And bringing our bodies and all of that too is something I've been more attuned to.
Yeah, it's really true. And Calvary is even just in its DNA a doing, an active. People want a job. A lot of folks want to let me be an usher. And I get that. And then small communities do form in the Flower Guild or in the Altar Guild or in the choir that are really rich. Or the folks who come to 915 regularly end up like having continued conversations and relationships with folks. Yeah, I think it's real. You're excited for me? Oh, thank you. Yeah, Michelle.
I feel like what you're talking about a lot is creating things, the creation of things, and what that looks like, and in doing that in community, and just thinking how that naturally intersects with our faith, because we're made in the image of a creator, so we're meant to create. And so it doesn't really even matter what it is that we're creating, whether it's a chair or a pillow or whatever, but it's just something about that.
Yeah, I just heard on a podcast someone saying, you're made, exactly what you said, we were made by the Creator to be creators, whatever it is. And even just imaginatively, I think this is actually important. I didn't say it out loud. I think one of the problems is that we are much more likely to be told we're consumers and be measured as consumers than as creators. It might be the same thing taking place, but something about the language about how we participate in the economy has more to do with consumption than creation. That's a really different mindset to be in. And I'm glad you said that, because I don't think it's just a sidebar. It's just not the story. I think there's much more doing and creating together in the scriptural story than figure out how you can consume resources. Yeah, Mimsy.
It seems to me that what Calvary uniquely does is create community. I was thinking of how many miles we collectively have driven, walked, or whatever to get here this morning. And some of us have been doing it for 35, 40 years. And it's this working together, serving together, and just being here from all the different walks of life we have uniquely. I live within walking distance of Holy Communion. And I was thinking, most of those people see each other all the time, and they see each other on Sunday. And it's a vibrant, wonderful place. But there's something about driving through the traffic, and my neighbors clocked me driving down here, and they taught me how to drive more slowly. But it's just this wonderful connection, I think, which is a creative thing.
Yeah, making a community is a creative thing. Yeah. And the effort. I think we learned some of this. I think there was a lot of reflection as the pandemic waned, or at least as it didn't affect our lives, and how much we need embodied relationships. Grateful for the ways we could have access to each other's lives in other ways, but parts of ourselves that need feeding with embodied relationship.
Okay, not last question, but whatever.
Maybe.
Okay. My impression is that we live in a Western world where we have deliverables, and we have consuming, and we have just a way of living, especially America. And in our faith, as Americans, a lot of times it is kind of deliberate in that sense. But this is a spirit-filled kind of journey, and it is a mystery, and who knows what's going to come from it, and who knows what you're going to bring back. But I'm thrilled that you are open to it and that you get to do this. So.
And that you're coming back.
I am coming back.
Thank you, Tommy Parker. Yes.
I am coming back. Yeah, thank you thank you all. This was, thanks for entrusting me with this. I mean, it's not anything I take lightly and for granted, but there's great, cool folks. The work goes on here, while I wander away. Yeah.
The more we're talking about this, I think it'd be really cool if you would think about when you come back that you have some kind of a class and you invite people to come in and we can all create something together.
There we go. No, it's okay. Catherine's talked about
Ask
some
and
of
you
that.
shall receive.
Catherine's talked about that, like thinking about how it might reimagine some of these things. Something easy, yeah. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for the conversation, for your interest, for the time.